Sounds great.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Sidebar Speaker Series. If you're a member, welcome back. If you're not a member, Sidebar is a career growth platform. It started off as a peer group for senior leaders where we would meet on a regular basis, get access to people like Owen and others. And now it's turned into a completely different thing. There's so much more we get. You get warm intros, and speaker series is one of those things. We meet every week. We bring in experts in two main categories. One is, and I think this is on top of mind for everybody, right? What should we learn about AI and upskill ourselves? And the other set of topics is what is outside of AI, what is there for us outside of AI, and how should we prep ourselves to position ourselves in this noisy world. So today we have a fantastic opportunity to blend both those topics with Owen here. Owen is a managing partner at Riviera Partners, and he has been a founder and CEO himself. Owen's a friend of Sidebar. He's been at many of our events previously. So if you've known him and you've come here to say hi, thank you for showing support. But if you don't know him, you should check him out. Owen, thank you again for presenting to our community here. I'm Sue Belagodu. I'm a founding member at Sidebar. I've been a Sidebar member for many years now and benefited from it. Outside of Sidebar, I'm a managing partner of my own firm where I do AI consulting. I also founded an AI company, a startup 2 years ago, and know very well how difficult it is to not just build, but sell an AI product. So if you're here and you're looking to learn from everybody, then you're with the right group of people. So Owen, welcome again. Please go ahead, share your slides with us, and everyone's locked in. I can see some people have their morning tea, coffee ready to hear you today.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Appreciate everyone's time. I see a green mug floating. I left my Shamrock cup in the other room, but that's very real. No, it's great to see everyone this morning. As mentioned by Sue, I've done a few chats with the Sidebar community on different topics, all generally around kind of getting hired in different guises, but mostly about how we're telling our stories as product leaders and how most of us, frankly, do a poor job. And we fall into some very consistent old patterns of bad storytelling and not signaling value in the right way to the right room at the right time. There's a separate presentation I've done that I'm happy to share with anybody after if you're interested, just in more general terms about how you're telling your story on LinkedIn, how you're telling it in your resume, how you're starting to present yourself in interviews. If that's of interest, I'll happily ship that to anybody afterwards, or Sue can. Today, though, very specifically, I want to focus on what the narrative around AI is and how you can best position yourself specific to that element. So I'm going to skip some of the macro storytelling about career arcs and really focus on some of the AI components, because the narrative in the market has shifted, I'd say, in the last 3 months, even maybe 6 months, even still. Like what it was 12 months ago, 18 months ago is not what it is today. How you need to tell your story today is different than it was, obviously, 6 months ago, and the market is just moving very, very fast. So that's where we'll put the focus. I'll walk us through just a few kind of market level perceptions, first and foremost, tie that to how I think fundamentally we need to show up as product leaders in interviews, and then very specific AI stuff. And then a format I've used in the past that people seem to like is stuff we hear candidates say, what we actually hear, and how you can upgrade that thing that you're saying that's actually sending the wrong signal compared to what you think you're trying to say. So we'll get through to that. So I would rather be a little bit more interactive, particularly in, say, the last 15 minutes through the chat or off mute. But Sue, if you don't mind, if you see anything pop up like that's a pressing question in the chat, I probably won't have to be able to see it as
Yeah,
well when I'm presenting. So
I
feel
got
free
it.
to pop questions in there. Thank you.
Perfect.
So
Yeah.
with that, I will share and we'll get going here. Get out of the presenter mode and just share my screen.
Wow.
And tell me when I go into presenter mode if you can still see me. Has everyone still got the presentation?
Yep. We see.
Okay. Awesome. skip over this nonsense. Suffice it to say, done a few searches, know a few things about recruiting. Was very pleased actually at the last Sidebar event I went to in person. I met a guy, Eoin O'Toole, who some of you may know, and he actually just got a job through me and Riviera Partners and as a SVP of product at a Series B startup, which was great. So it's cool to meet a cool guy and be able to help him out. So, but yeah, look, this is the topic as mentioned. There's a shift, obviously, in all of our worlds on the tech side. And a lot of us have been anchored on talking about that tech and not talking about what we as humans do with said tech. And that's where the narrative is that I'd like to be able to help you shift toward. So this is the new normal for me, is that AI is raising the floor for everybody. We can automate a lot. We can all become more competent at tasks we couldn't have maybe even done, never mind being competent in previously. But ultimately, particularly in the product seat, it's our judgment that will help raise or set the ceiling for our businesses. And that's the lens that we need to be thinking about telling our story through. And I'll break down some ways to do that over the next little while. But keep that in mind. The assumption now is that the floor is raised with AI, that you are doing something with it, that your output is increased, that your teams are more efficient, that you have designers who can build. But it's then, so what is the next piece, right? That people want to understand. And that's where the judgment comes in. So clicking through here. Everybody has some sort of baseline competence right now, so it's kind of easy to fake, and it's very much harder now for you to differentiate who you are by just talking about having a baseline in AI. So it really is about applying the next level of judgment to that. Everybody has something to say on AI. So you just giving us the same basics as everybody else is just not going to cut it when it comes to an interview or how you're talking about yourself in your resume. What does matter is this, the trade-offs, the thinking behind it. Why am I using AI in this instance and that instance? Why am I using this model over that model? Why am I taking this input or output over that output? It's how you think is really what interviews are boiling down to at this point. And there is an opportunity for everybody to demonstrate that through their resume, through their LinkedIn. And I think most of us are missing that opportunity, candidly. So we'll look at how to fix that shortly. Then same thing, right? We can get our output up, but I'm hiring a product leader who I can trust, whose judgment I can believe in. A lot of it is taste. If any of you are in the consumer arena, then taste is probably the number one thing that's setting any product leader apart right now. And when we're getting asked for product leadership hires, executive hires in that arena, it comes down to the intuition still matters, right? You can have it AI backed, but human intuition still matters. Great design choices still matter. If you're in that area, you're going to be expected to build yourself a little bit with AI just to get something off the ground that demonstrates that taste, that then you can put in the hands of engineers to set them down the line on. And then that type of conviction. So there's a lot beyond the basics now that you're expected to speak to. Like I said, 12 months ago, you were asked to talk about how AI is accelerating your output. Now we kind of assume it is, then what? So to keep that in mind. Has everyone heard this expression, AI pilled, by the way? It's a new one on me in the last couple of weeks, but I resisted using AI pilled and used AI fluent here. But what does that mean for us to be AI fluent and still be distinctly human, right? It's core skills like communication, customer empathy, originality, clarity. How do you drive those areas? In a resume, in a LinkedIn, in an interview, you have a show me, don't tell me moment, as I like to say, on communication. You are tasked with simplifying oodles of information as a product leader, customer data, sales data, engineering data, all of the product roadmap, the vision, the company strategy. There's so much that you have to hold and be able to simplify and distill and translate and communicate back to somebody. If your resume or your LinkedIn or your interview answer is a ramble, and I've seen people with a 12-month job stint and 7 paragraphs on it, if that gives you an idea of what I mean by a ramble, you're showing me, no matter what you tell me, you can tell me you're a great communicator all day, but you're showing me you're not. This has showed up recently, and I'll give you an example from the real world where we have a lot of interview processes at the moment have working sessions, and one of the working sessions was supposed to be an async collaboration with the CEO about some insights on work that this person had done before. And a couple of interviews you see with the CEO, he's a very terse or curt communicator, and the person sent back a 27-page document. That was the end of their interview process for him. You've got to match the tempo of the
sure.
on the other side. Sorry, Jack, if you can hear us, if you don't mind muting. Actually, I can mute you. It's all good. I have the power. That's fantastic. We disqualified a candidate because he wasn't demonstrating clear communication. He was showing a spool of thinking, but it's the distillation that matters most. Those skills matter immensely. Customer empathy, like I said, that's a kind of a given for all of us in the product seat. But originality, there's the old saying when we got into the BI world in pre-2010, into the big data world from 2010 to 16, that data is only as good as the question you ask of it. That's never been more prevalent than now with AI. And I don't mean just the quality of your prompts or whatever it is that you're interrogating, but the product leader is the one that we need to ask the smart question to get to the right insight using AI. So focus on how you come to that question, how you interrogate data, how you think about looking for little hidey holes of data and pockets of information and things that you should pay attention to and not. That judgment area is massive, and that's what leads to your originality. Nobody really spends enough time talking about that. We talk about the tool. We talk, I like Claude over this for that or the other thing, but not why I'm asking what I'm asking, what led me to interrogate the data in such a way that led to the insight. Spend time there, because that's the differentiator for you mostly in a market. This is kind of a zoom out on product leadership. I call them the strategic senses. This is a carryover from my previous presentation because this to me applies more than ever as you're talking about this assumption that AI exists as a foundation upon which we can layer and be more efficient. Now we have to talk about these other elements of the product leadership role that give us our unique differentiators. So there's the business sense is the first and foremost. If anybody here is working in fintech or another regulated industry, you haven't had the chance to move at the pace of AI like a number of other industries because of regulation, because of privacy and security and a lot of other constraints. So showing up to an interview for a company where it is more AI native, and you're saying, well, I haven't really shifted the volume and velocity in AI you have in the last 2 years, is just going to sink your case. But if you're able to demonstrate there was a business reason for the pace at which you used and incorporated AI and spent time focused on that, that's a much stronger answer to the same thing, which is it was appropriate for what the business needed at the time, not I couldn't, or I haven't, or I didn't ship at that pace, but the business demanded X, we moved at this pace, I was able to push the boundaries here or there, and then I was able to sunset certain things, but you need to spend time wrapping all of your AI do's and did nots in the right business context for people at that time. The rest of these are reasonably self-explanatory. I will spend quite a bit of time in a moment on people sense, because ultimately product is a leadership role, whether you're an individual contributor or a CPO. You are a leader cross-functionally, you're a leader through influence, not through command and control. And so how we lead people through these moments with AI is a huge part of the narrative that you need to have locked down. So was there a question that popped in the chat? I think I saw something pop up, was there?
Just some comments.
Yeah. So anything that before I move on, so.
No, I think mostly agreeing with what you're saying. It's resonating with folks.
Yeah, I think Harsha, I completely agree. Common sense is not that common. It's a great way to put it. Evelyn, you had a question, hand raised there?
Yeah, I'm just curious, how would you then define some of the failure story? Because every company can talk about, I launched this AI feature, that AI feature, but not all of them drive ARR or ABC. So there are plenty of the failure story. How do you combine these 5 pillars in an interview?
Perfect. That'll be the next slide. So you're right on topic there, Evelyn. Excellent. So yeah, let's talk about that. It's a good point, right? So forgive the denseness of the slide here. We'll break it down one by one, but this is some of the areas then that I want to get into, and what's expected of you, by the way, when you show up to an interview right now. So the power of the narrative. This on the left, this why, what, so what, excuse me, is how I tell everybody to tell their story as a product leader. Everybody, 95% of everybody is telling a whole lot of the what and the so what, and we miss the why. You have to start with the why, not to sound like Simon Sinek here, but you have to start with the why. What was the business context in which you acted? What was the customer context, the revenue, the nervous system of the organization? Why were you hired? Put it that way. Why were you asked to do that project or that feature? If you can demonstrate that to me, I can self-identify with you much easier as a potential hiring manager, as an executive CEO, whomever, that I have a similar point in time as to which you operated previously. So start with the why. If some of you know Rachna, who's done these talks with me before, she's got a great example of it. And she just talks about, I was hired to turn around a flailing group that was doing this. Here's what I did. The outcomes then were the revenue, the dollars, the retention rates, whatever. But too many of us focus on what we did and the outcomes, and we miss the why. And we need that signal first and foremost. So same thing, Evelyn, to your question, starting with why you even did the feature or whatever. Most of us get a lot of board pressure, CEO pressure, whoever, to say we've got to do something with AI, but there's probably more to it when it came down to what you chose to do. So explain that why. So on the right here, let's just kind of break these down one by one. And this is to your question, I think, Evelyn, as well, right? But this AI fluency concept, right? AI should be a partner to you. It isn't a feature that you ship. It should be now you're expected as a product leader or an engineering leader to talk about how you use AI in your core product, talk about how you use AI internally for building things, prototypes, for hypotheses, whatever it is that you're doing yourself. So for your own motions and your team's motions, and how you're helping influence AI adoption across the firm. So maybe it's looking at what can we do with AI and 10 CS reps that we are currently doing with 100 CS reps and no AI, right? So thinking about those applications in the full customer lifecycle. There's a lot of different elements to what AI fluent means in the product seat at the moment. So again, it comes back to being able to articulate the business logic behind a choice. Or if I prefer Claude for a certain use case versus GPT versus whatever else, tell me why. And I don't need the technical why, I need the business logic behind that model choice. There are anecdotes everywhere you look of senior leaders taking 3 months off just to go back to school, proverbially, and immerse themselves in AI in order to become fluent. Not all of us have the luxury of taking 3 months off work, but if you're dabbling right now, you're behind. And so you need to find a way to go back to school and get deep on these AI areas. I'll kind of jump a little bit, but this AI fluency and knowing the product stack, people are being interrogated in interviews about the product architecture. So what's the foundational model? Why did you choose that? What's the control layer? What data store does it tap? How does all of that ultimately make sense or not make sense for the user outcomes that we're trying to achieve here? Like, you're asked to go pretty deep on this. And you don't need the tech stack, but you do need to know the product stack. And that's a key element of it. Then you have to think about where there might be hallucinations. What's the shelf life of this model? How do we think about drift, ultimately over time in our applications? So there's a level of technical depth that you're in rigor that you're being asked to go to that you haven't been asked to go to in most cases before. And you can't skirt past this anymore. 12 months ago, you didn't need to be this deep. You do now. So if it's hard knowledge to come by, I appreciate, but you got to do the hard things to get to the good places. So if you're skirting over the top of that depth of understanding, control layers, data stores, etc., you need to take time to tool up and get that knowledge. Easier said than done. We all have full-time jobs and then lots of other things going on around it in some cases. So, but know that if you're going to go interview, that's the expectation right now. I'll give you an anecdote that might be shocking to some, but there was another candidate who interviewed for a job for us here in the last couple of weeks, claimed that he built an AI system, and a feature and a product, and got it out the door. The CEO said, great, throw open your laptop, let's vibe code something together. The candidate did not have an IDE on their laptop, had no idea what they were doing, and was BSing their way through that. But a CEO was happy to jump on and vibe code with somebody as part of an interview process in order to understand their AI fluency. And we're seeing a little bit more and more of that through working sessions where we're getting asked for 2 elements of the working session. Use AI on this piece, don't use AI on that piece. We want to see the difference, right? So you've got to be asked to really produce at this stage.
Owen, there are a couple questions around, are there cost-effective ways of developing AI fluency, and is there a course that you would recommend?
Most of the folks I know are just trying to learn through online courses. There's a lot of free material and stuff out there. If you're part of a sidebar community, I would ask around there what people have used and how they've used it. But it takes just some good old-fashioned, if you don't want to spend money on it, then it's just some good old-fashioned digging around and Googling. The irony here is you can ask the AI tool to teach you how to use itself. So if in doubt, just ask the AI tool, just tell it where your starting point is, what you do and don't understand, tell it what your potential use cases are, and it will walk and talk you through how to use itself, which is a fantastic and very easy way to do it. And a lot of people have taught themselves a lot more than they thought they could that way. So,
thank you.
A specific course I don't have, but I will keep it near to the ground and let you know when one pops up. Cool. But this strategic impact stuff, again, this is an outcome. This is a so what element, right? Where AI maybe helped you identify a gap in the market, or we cut losses on something because it was starting to show a trend that we hadn't identified. Those are the strategic lifts. Again, 12 months ago, you could talk about using AI to interrogate the market. Now it has to be, okay, what was the impact on the backside of that? And then same on the decision augmentation here. It's the patterns, but you're tasked with whether it's an ethical judgment, a brand judgment, an empathy-based judgment that is uniquely human for that final call about what to do with the outputs or the recommendations of AI. Spend your time talking about that moment, that layer of human application to the AI, not talking about using the AI for the patterns. This one's huge. Just that, like that decision augmentation, some of it ties to what I said earlier about business context, but this now gets into high EQ elements that AI suffers sorely from a lack of. Like, what are those little elements that ethically maybe didn't make sense, or from a loyalty, brand, how your user base sees your organization or identifies with you, that it can't possibly know, that would betray a trust that you have, not because you're stealing their data, but there's other ways that we betray trust with our users that AI may lead you down a path of that if you take it blindly, you won't identify, and it won't identify for itself. So spend your time talking about those elements. Down below the team leading stuff, and I know I'm talking a lot here. I'll kind of go through, and then I want to make sure we've got time for conversation. But the team leading stuff, this is age-old product leadership, right? I'm a cross-functional leader. I need to move and motivate people directly and indirectly across the entire organization. At the end of the day, you can do whatever you do with your tech, but if you don't have a great reference, if you don't have a manager that's advocating for you, if you don't have champions in the organization for you, your career is going to stall out anyway, no matter how fantastically proficient you are in AI. And so talk about using AI across the organization. Are you a sledgehammer? Are you an influencer? How do you lead people through change management, maybe in areas like design, customer success, product marketing, areas that are tangential to product, but that you need to be along for the ride with what it is that you're trying to achieve. Again, these are the conversations I want everybody having in their interviews, not down in the weeds. We covered the product stack, and then the outcomes. This is back to Evelyn, your point, right? Which is, end of the day, all that's great. Who cares? Like, what did you actually achieve with it, right? So Give me preservation or give me generation language based on those outcomes, or ideally a bit of both. I think, again, people are stuck in, like, the outcomes right now are like, we were able to reduce our headcount by 5 people. That's not an outcome. That's a function of what you set out to achieve, but the outcome should have either been capital preservation, like speak the language of the stakeholder on the other side of the interview table, but like ultimately I want to understand how did that either translate into greater capital for me or capital preservation that allowed me to then reinvest in the business in an area that we wanted to, or just preserve, burn, or whatever the situation of that company is. But think about telling your story through the executive stakeholder or the board member's lens, not just the fact of what happened. Cool. So the next bit I'll go into is very specifically some things that we hear people say, like a bunch of what not to say, basically, and how we can change that. Is there any questions on what's here before I move to that?
Yeah, I think there's one good question here from Shilpi. She says, are you hearing differences in expectations between companies of different levels of maturity and or size, or do these apply to all of them?
Good question. This now applies to all of them. 18 months ago, 24 months ago, we had big companies looking at very different phenotypes of product leaders. There was the cross-functional, product leader, strategist. There was a lot of different flavors of it. Now it's, to call it a player coach would be an overstatement, but there's an expectation, regardless of organizational size right now, that you can go deep, no matter what your title sits in front of you. And that's this stuff like the product stack. It's about understanding model trade-offs, that you have more than a passing perspective or opinion on this, that you have conviction around the depth of what you would do and how you make those decisions. That's being asked. We do, senior roles at, LinkedIn and Google, down to, a Series A, startup hiring their first VP product, right? That these are being expected, like I say, across the board now. Good question.
Thanks. We can come back. I think there's a couple more, but we can come back. We're halfway there, so I want to make sure you can get through the next section.
All good. Cool. These are what I call the silent disqualifiers. So everything I'll put here are things that I've heard more than once in a conversation with candidates, or I've heard from clients during their interview processes. So there's this tendency to over-trust and let AI run on an automated track over here, and I can let it handle all the details, which may be saying, in order to signal, look how efficient I can be, I can have this running for me and I'm focused over here. But what it comes across as more is a level of detachment rather than a strategic application of AI. So better ways to think about that is being very specific about what you will allow AI to do with some degree of autonomy, so repetitive tasks, etc. And then what you're doing with your time as the trade-off is solving customer problems. But just indicating set and forget or implicit trust is not it's not going to send the right signal. This is another big one. Over trust, again, kind of on that same theme, but it's objective, and I want to get rid of my biases, or it can see patterns we can. It's smarter than me. I've got to trust the AI. Again, that signals a lack of ownership. And all these things on the left may be right, but it still requires that you own what you're saying and adopting into the organization, or what data you're using, or what insight you're using. So you've got to have a more strategic level of an answer on that. So it could be stuff like when and to what point you use AI, and then how you validate what it's given you. So I might use it as a scenario generator. Then I took what it recommended. I took the user interviews. I had the human verified intuition that underpins that. And then we ended up with this decision as a result. Whereas the previous decision would have been this if it was just AI, and just showing that layer of thoughtfulness on top. There are a countless number of people who have given me this type of answer on the left of it is smarter. It sees data and patterns and stuff that we just can't see. Why would I think I'm smarter than that? Well, you are. Ultimately, the human layer matters more. And then taking the user interviews and kind of bringing the intuition or the brand guidelines or whatever it is that you need on top of that. Back to my point about needing to be deep. AI that's an engineering thing, right? They can handle all the details. They need to worry about what model we're using. They need to worry about the longevity of that or what data stores we're using. Again, a perfectly fine answer 18 months ago, not a fine answer today. And you're expected to be a great partner to engineering in the decisioning of the product stack, as mentioned in previously. So this looks like you're not accountable to what you're using. It looks like you're not curious about what you're using and why and how it's best serving or not serving the needs. And then how you communicate with your engineering teams. That's a ball over the fence to somebody else. That's not a partnering conversation on the left. So starting to allow yourself to get deeper on why you and engineering, if needs be, made the decision to use a certain model or why that model gave us an output to focus on this segment over that segment. There has to be the why layer to all of that. Simplification is the name of the game for all of us as well, right? So why did we use this approach that was simpler? This one looked more complex, or vice versa. Why did we choose a complex one over a simpler one? You have to have a rationale for all of that. And then ultimately, who did you tell? How did you tell? How did you get buy-in? That's the role of the product manager still, regardless of whatever the technical decision was that was made. Got 3 more of those, but and I'd love to hear ones from other people in the room as we go as well. I'm playing with AI tools on the side. Not everybody's had the ability or the luxury to ship an AI product or an AI native product or a feature in the last 12 or 18 months. And again, within 24 months ago, it was okay to say, I'm playing with the tools on the side. Maybe you haven't had a chance in your organization. And it may still be, as I mentioned, with fintech, regulated industries, maybe you're in a more archaic space and you're trying to retool toward an AI native organization, that you haven't had a chance to really use AI in production at scale just yet. But when you're saying I'm playing with the tools on the side, it gives an impression of just a superficial understanding. So I need to understand what you're doing and why you're doing it on the side and where you're able to apply it. Even if you can't use it in production, give me a sense of that. So there's something you can actually do in the real world, even if it's not in your organization, an internal process that can be done, prototyping, viability. You've got to get hands-on with the tools in a way that matters today, not in 6 months. You're going to get left behind pretty quickly here at this stage. So playing with the tools on the side could sound like, look, I'm curious and I'm dabbling, even though I can't use it as much as I'd like in my organization. That time has passed. You need to now be doing something practical, tactical with AI somewhere that shows the use, and then you can apply what we talked about in the previous slides about how you're using your business context applied to those principles. Oh, that one shouldn't be there. Sorry about that. Then ignore that middle one. That's from the previous slide. I made an error on my editing. This bottom one, we tried AI, but it didn't work, so we dropped it. Surprising. For those that saw the news about Block and making their layoffs, and apologies if anybody from here is on there, but there was a surprising stat that 30% of the engineers at Block had never logged into their AI tools, which was startling. And yet the guys for that layoff was, we're using AI so much more efficiently that we can do it. Now, I think there was other reasons for it. I don't want to get into that today, but if you tried AI and then dropped it, or I don't think it can do everything, whatever it may be, but it just sounds like you're inflexible. It sounds like you're not learning. There may have been a very valid case for dropping AI. Again, just to use the simple example, in a regulated industry, you try to use it, it consistently had some friction with a constraint that you have from a regulation out there. Give me that business logic. Don't just talk about we tried it and it didn't work. So looking at better ways to say that, different approaches, what we learned, what we didn't learn, what we thought we might learn and were surprised by, and ultimately when it comes back to being true to our brand, our ethics, or whatever aligned with our user needs, then we'll come back to it, at the end of the day. Cool. I could go on with a lot of these. And like I said, the one in the middle is from an old one of just kind of have people talk about their own products and whatnot. But like I said, I would rather be much more interactive with this. It's always been the best part of working with this sidebar group is that there's questions that are much more specific around the room inside of the principles I just shared. So I'll stop sharing and I'd like to open it up more to conversation, and I have more I could talk about that isn't slide specific. But
Perfect.
what are people feeling and seeing from the market? What roadblocks are you seeing? And I can let you know if I have a perspective.
Oh, and I think there's a question from Peter, sorry if I'm not pronouncing it. And then Neil had a follow-up question. Do you want to come off mute and ask the question yourself? This is around having a GitHub repo.
Yep. I'm just trying to find it here in the chat. Yeah, Peter, if you want to.
Peter, are you able to? Oh, okay,
No,
essentially.
I found it here. Yeah.
Okay.
So it says, is having a GitHub repo with your own AI built products, either for personal or solving business problem, a valid strategy, or would that be considered overkill? I don't think that's considered overkill. I'm not asking anybody to go do that, but that is not going to be a bad thing to have, right? I think, again, we're not asking product leaders to be engineers, but you need to understand your product stack, not the technical stack. But if you've built stuff on the side and you can demonstrate it, that's better than the I'm playing with tools on the side. That's a show me, don't tell me moment. So I like those.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to unmute myself.
Oh,
but yeah, you basically answered my question. So like my thinking here is around, you're not here to impress the engineers with your coding skills, because you most likely have none. But just to show them that, you understand the key concepts, you know how to talk to them, and you're not going to ask them about the simplest or the silliest things to explain when you're working together.
Yep. Yeah, like I said, I think trying to become a coder is not the ask, but if you have a bit of a skill there, great, and it's just a great demonstration. And I think it would be back to my point about how do you differentiate right now. That could be a differentiator.
Neil had a follow-up question to that. Thank you, Pietro.
Thanks.
Neil,
Yeah, my follow-up around that was I saw some post the other day that it could be an anti-signal, like 24% of PMs have GitHub, but a lot of it, what's in there is just like, I made a website, here it is. And so it's like, great, people were doing that 30 years ago. It's not like an exciting thing. And so, yeah, just curious if you've seen that emerge at all, where someone's like, oh, here's my GitHub, and people look at it and say like, oh, well, you did that on a Saturday for an hour, and it's not like, does that turn into this anti-signal that people are talking about, or is that just influencers talking?
A lot of things is just influencers talking these days. But no, look, I think at the end of the day, we are storytellers. Is it additive to your story to demonstrate what it is that you've built? And if it's not, put it away. If it is, so back to like a scenario testing tool that you built or something, that might just be about how you pick what restaurant you want to go to. That's fine, but there's this complexity to the scenario testing, whatever it is that you're able to do, and it adds to your story. Great, share it. If not, if you can't clearly paint that picture for yourself, then I would not share it.
thank you. Claire, you want to go next?
Yeah, I was curious if cost management is coming up as a needed skill at all for product managers, and how they're utilizing AI or running AI in their products. I have just been at a nonprofit, so that was a very big issue for us when we're using AI because of limited funds. But is that also part of the conversation on the commercial side?
Depending on where you sit. So I would lump pretty close to your domain, but private equity firms and generally private equity backed companies have got more consideration to less about the cost of the AI itself, but what can AI do to help us realize cost efficiencies across the rest of the organization. They're all about EBITDA and maximizing margin. I don't think the right answer is to say I can use AI to chop 20 heads or 50 heads or whatever it might be. It's how do you use AI back to that point of like raising the floor, getting more efficiency, greater levels of outcomes and outputs from your teams, and talking through that. Just again, signaling the right thing to the room. If it's a growth business, then you want to talk about how you're using AI to accelerate revenue. If it's a business that's in the middle of a turnaround or whatever it might be, then it is about how do I use AI for capital preservation or reduction, right? I'm not seeing a big demand on like the actual cost of the use of the AI tools themselves. That hasn't popped up because the current working assumption for most people still is that it should pay for itself in dividends if you use it.
Got it. So it's not coming up as like if you're delivering AI features in your product, like how much it's costing you to run those features. Okay, great.
Not if you can paint a picture for the revenue return or savings. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Claire. Aisha, are you able to come off mute and ask your question?
Yes. Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. First of all, the do nots and how to upgrade your answer, that was very helpful. Like a cheat sheet would be very useful if that can be shared. And now that we have to signal our AI fluency even before we land the interview or being shortlisted, is it like necessary, or would you recommend to create like a portfolio, maybe on Notion or on Lovable, and showing any workflow or automation that I have created to signal to be even shortlisted for AI PM roles?
It's a good question. And it's kind of tied to the GitHub thing, like what are the extra credentials that I can demonstrate? I would rather see people spend time on creating the narrative of the business context and the why in which they operated and applied AI, and show me the whole point of this one today is like, what is the human element that you uniquely brought to the table in this scenario? Spend more time thinking about how you're framing that in your resume and your LinkedIn and your job applications than on the bells and whistles of some of the more technical elements to this on the back end. You'll be able to talk to those when push comes to shove, but if you can demonstrate the business impact and the why, that's going to go further than some of these other areas.
Thanks, Owen. Mother, are you able to come off mute and ask your question?
Yeah, no, happy to. Hopefully my video comes on fine. Thanks, John, for this. Simple question, at least from my end. I see my world moving towards agentic. All the talk is about, hey, not just AI, about having agents and so on. And one of the biggest things that I recognize is in my leaders is the understanding of the industry context, of the audience context, because that's essential. And industry has been one of those things that I think more people gravitate towards the last 3, 4, 5 years. Are you seeing more of that, less of that, same overall? And is it splitting hairs on agentic versus AI?
Yeah, it's a good question. Look, I think, and I'm not the AI expert in the room here, but I speak to a lot of them. The consensus around agentic from the folks that I know that are deepest in it. So in addition to product, we do CTO and engineering stack. So whether it was Jerry Dishler's guy around a 50,000 person or an eng at Google, down to folks running stuff in DeepMind and places like that, their consensus is most agentic builds are going to be commoditized away within the next 18 months. So becoming an expert in building an agentic something or other is not going to be your point of difference. It's going to be part of the furniture, probably, that agentic flows and workflows, things like that will be a means to an end, but they are not the end. And so when you come back to how you articulate your value, again, 12 months ago, you could talk about we're going to build an agentic something. Now it's again the so what associated with that is more important because they're going to increasingly become a commoditized thing.
Got it. Thank you.
I don't know if I answered the first part of your question. Can you re-clarify just what you're saying more or less of?
Yeah, I was trying to get a sense of at least from the vantage point I sit, correct? It's agents are autonomous. They require an understanding of the workflow of your customer, the industry they are in, or the audience, right? If they're a CFO, if they're a CMO, etc. Most product managers, product leaders will have good AI skills, but won't have the workflow understanding, deep, fully workflow understanding. And that's where I was trying to get a sense of, hey, are people starting to value that?
Yeah.
More and more?
Yeah, look, I think for me, I've always liked to distill when I start thinking about a match for a product leader in a particular company, there's a couple of things I like to think through. One is who knows how to build for this buyer? And that buyer doesn't necessarily have to be, I'm in healthcare specifically, and it's a healthcare, and I've got 5 years in that industry. But it may be a level of abstraction you can achieve is it's a non-tech native user at the end of the day, and where they're going to engage with your services most. There you can find a lot more analogs, and people we're finding are very happy to receive candidacy from different industry domains if they have an analog like that. So a fundamental tenet of what makes a defining user feature is shared between the couple of industries. So it could be construction tech and health tech or whatever, but where and how you're meeting your users matters, and what type of experience that they're expecting. If it's super white glove, if it's light touch, if it's low tech, high tech, if it's very dense surfaces, whatever, then those are the analogs people are building more than it has to be X amount of years in this specific industry, if that helps.
Got it. By the way, thanks for the tip on Jerry, classmate. Reminder to reach out to him.
He's a
He just left, yeah, on our World's group, like he left a year ago. So yeah,
he's got quite a brain, that guy. But, if you ever want to pick somebody's brain on people,
he was always, yeah.
Yep.
Victor?
Yep.
Hi. With regards to managing our storytelling on LinkedIn, given how our feeds seem to be getting flooded with more and more noise, as we're progressing and building out our portfolios, what would you put in terms of weighting with regards to posting versus focusing on how we're positioning our about me and our details within our existing experiences? How should we think about balancing that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I take a bit of a contrarian stance here. Look, I think you have to play the game on LinkedIn right now with content, right? But as you say, it's just a big advertising reel anymore, your feed, right? And it's all just self-promotion, but you have to play that game, right? I joke, and pardon if I offend anybody here, but I half joke when I tell people that when I look at a LinkedIn profile picture of a product or a marketing leader, and it's them on stage with a microphone, it's off-putting, right? I'm like, you're going to spend more time promoting yourself than you are getting the job done. That's kind of a signal that sends. There's lots of little things, but you do need to promote yourself anyway through content, through showing you're in the river, if you like, with what it is that you're saying you're passionate about. So you don't just show up at an interview in a vacuum being passionate about AI or what it can achieve, or having opinions on these areas. So play that game. But LinkedIn as an engagement arena for you is so saturated. I'm an executive recruiter. It's my job to talk to people. My LinkedIn inbox has got 550 unread messages because there's just so much spam and crap that comes through there. I can't pay attention to it. And so if you're looking to manage your job application process through LinkedIn, don't do it that way. Find a softer path. There's always a softer path to the individual, to the hiring manager, to an intro. At the end of the day, what that really is about a proxy for trust. Like if somebody says Sue's great, I take that interview and she comes in on a front foot more than if she had a better application than you on paper, or a worse application than you on paper. She's already ahead. So you just find a way to get a path into that organization, or reach out directly to a prospective hiring manager or somebody who used to work at the company and find a path that way. But a LinkedIn in-mail or a job application button click is not going to get it done.
Thank you. Harsha, you have your hands raised. You have a question?
Yes, I may have a spicy question for you. You said that we should partner with AI, but developing a product leadership profile, is it worthwhile to really have a perspective of where you think what AI can or cannot do, or where it should do something, it should not do something? We all know that AI can hallucinate. It has biases, both fed from human biases or also learned biases. And how do we develop that effective story that you partnered with AI, but you also made AI partner with you to improve itself so that it becomes a better partner in the ongoing cycle. So I just want to get your perspective on that. I mean, you said some great things about shifting the narrative and rephrasing the narrative, but I'd love to know, as a human product leader, where do you have the stance of how you really work with AI?
Yeah, the framing I've liked on this is if you think about AI as an employee, now it's one of your team members. All of your team members, human or otherwise, right now have constraints, right? They have blind spots, they have biases, they have hallucinations, whether good ones or bad ones. But all of that exists in any other fact of your business and certainly in your teammates and your employees. So think about AI that way. And if you can talk about AI that way, I think that changes the narrative about just understanding this employee. I talked in the preamble for this talk was about using AI and wielding it as a weapon. It's the same thing. Like it's just taking that star employee and using their highlights and pushing those forward and know where they've got blind spots and how do you then anticipate augmenting those and bringing it forward. So that framing, I think, is the one that I've found the easiest for people to digest as well.
So we should consider it as a human-like employee? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Like what can and can't this person, this thing do? And how do I augment its skills and its strengths and its weaknesses around that? Yep.
Thank you.
And I want to take three more minutes of questions, and I just want to flip the narrative a little bit and just talk about how I want you to interrogate hiring managers, because I think that matters too. But yeah, sorry, Elena.
Yeah.
Very quick. Nice to meet you. I'm both on the product and go-to-market side, have been for a while. I just recently took a couple of years off for personal reasons, and I am upskilling like crazy and loving it. But that puts me in a kind of interesting spot because I'm having to figure out how to frame my story and also be able to demonstrate my knowledge of AI and agents, which I'm actually enjoying working with as well. And I would just love your thoughts on how best to do that. Like, should I come up with narratives and sort of case studies that I can think through and, to demonstrate my knowledge thus far? Or what's the best thing?
Yeah, I think proactively attacking the surfaces of the company that you're going to be talking to, even before you apply. So we're doing it as part of working sessions and things right now is like, here's our roadmap. What would you change if money was no object and you had AI? You can do that from the outside in anyway. Like if you look at their business, look at their model, try to attack their go-to-market strategy, how you see them meeting the world. And as part of your application, rather than sending a resume, I'd be sending recommendations. Like, here's how I would use AI for X, Y, Z. It's again, a show me, don't tell me moment at the organization. I'd love to talk to you about that and how I can impact revenue and so on, right? It's a massive differentiator if you already come at it. You can be wrong, but you're going to engage me, in that regard. So I think that if anybody coming from the wild, so to speak, over the last couple of years, whether you've been not working or you've been working somewhere that's just not shipped AI at the speed people want, that's the next best thing you can do, is just be super proactive.
Great, thanks.
Hey, folks, we can continue to answer the questions, but I'd love for you to scan the QR code that you see on screen. This is an NPS we love to collect, best when folks are on the call. So please do that and don't stop your Q&A. If you still have questions for Owen, we can still take that while you're.
No, just on the NPS, feedback is a gift, so do please share. It's a very welcome. The flip of the script that I wanted to make just briefly was on then how we sift through the noise on the other side of the interview table, because there is a lot of fluff companies. There's a lot of AI posturing and AI theater at organizations, and then they're looking sometimes for product to be the silver bullet. We don't really have a strategy on how to do this thing. We're expecting you to kind of produce magic, and because AI is AI, then surely you can do it, right? So making sure that we're being very discerning with how we're interrogating hiring managers and organizations about their AI strategy. In some cases, it's just a board member banging a table saying, why aren't you doing more AI? In some cases, there's reasonably willful deceit about how much AI they actually are using and applying. Talked to a company recently that claimed they were AI processing for a certain area to identify issues and things. And when it came down to it, there was maybe 20% AI, but it was 80% human of what they were trying to achieve. And then what they want to get to is 80% AI and 20% human, but they were posturing like they were already there. And so when you dug in the interview process, really get specific about what's being shipped, what's not being shipped. To my point about the integrity of the product stack, like find out what kind of shape their data is in, because again, you cannot do great, meaningful AI work with a bunch of garbage data. It's the same as everything's ever been, garbage in, garbage out. If they have a proprietary data set, I think the question that Madhur asked, right, around building an agentic workflow, you're going to have a point of difference as an organization if there's a proprietary data set that you can expand upon, not borrowing a bunch of generic API plugged public data sets. It's going to make your job a lot harder in 24 months. It's going to make your job transition a lot harder in 24, 36 months. If you've gone to an organization that was doing AI theater and then you're spitting back into the market without having shipped something that had a meaningful, AI had a meaningful impact, and you're just not future-proofing yourself. So be very discerning about what you're being fed from the other side of the table, about what's actually real, what state data is in, what they haven't shipped. And then if they have any sort of a roadmap or strategy around how they plan to get there, really ask to see that. It's okay to ask to see roadmaps and strategies that exist and not just be on the defensive here. It, again, is a great show me, don't tell me moment when you can interrogate me in an interview process as you would the market, as you would customers and users, that you have an ability to get to truth. And for companies that have nothing to hide, that's going to be really, really well received. For ones that do, you'll probably find some resistance and you got the signal you need.
Really helpful, Owen. Absolutely. Any more questions? If not, please take a minute to answer that NPS questionnaire. It'll take you less than a couple minutes to finish that.
Yeah. Like I said, don't be afraid to put in the work right now. It's going to slow you down to speed you up. But if you're behind the 8 ball now, like I said, what's happened in the last 18, 24 months has just been so dynamic that good news is you're going to be assumed a baseline. So now it's what are you going to do with it? You're going to have to back up that you know that baseline at some point through a process, but it's people are assuming you have an AI baseline going into most interviews. Now, what are you going to do with it? So make sure you have the baseline so you can back it up first and foremost. And if you do, great. Shift the narrative off that. Get out of talking about outputs and velocity and efficiency and talk about business outcomes. Talk about moving the needle. Talk about new insights. Talk about leading people, leading organizations. Those are the pieces that differentiate at the end of the day. That's the human element that everybody here has different answers to. That's what's going to set you apart. And I'll give a quick plug, not that I was asked to, just to be clear. But if you haven't used Sidebar's super interviews tool, we're starting to adopt it here to give to every candidate who interviews through Riviera. It is a phenomenal interview prep tool. And it also has memory. So it'll learn your stories and tell you when to better use this story or that story when you're going into a specific interview. It is probably the best tool I've seen in the market by a long shot. And I promise I was not asked to give that plug. I just love it. So there you go.
That was nice, Owen. Yeah, I love the app. I mean, I'm not even interviewing. I do it just to sharpen some of my responses and answers. So if you're doing stage shows, you're giving podcast interviews, whatnot, it's really good for practicing for those as well. Thank you, everybody, for being here with us today. Owen, that was fantastic. Thank you for everything you shared with us, and those Q&A questions were amazing. Harsha, it's almost time for us to end the call. I'm not sure, Owen, if you have a couple of minutes to stay on, or is there a way to reach out to you? How can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, I forgot to bring that slide up, but Sue, maybe you can just send around my contact details. I'll send out the full deck too, so people have it, and then that the deck from the previous time, and then my contact details will be on there. Feel free to email me. I'm happy to make time.
Fantastic.
Don't send me a LinkedIn email. It'll get lost.
Thank you, Owen.